1834, England. Twins found tied to each other in an abandoned church. The church stood like a hollow skeleton against the gray sky. Its windows were shattered, its wooden doors swollen from years of rain. Yet inside, there was a silence that felt unnatural, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. It was here, in the summer of 1834, that villagers stumbled upon a scene so haunting it would never leave them. Two children, identical twins, were found bound together by coarse rope inside the church's cold, abandoned nave. They were not running, not crying, just sitting in eerie stillness, their small frames pressed tightly against each other as though they had grown from the same root. The villagers who entered that day swore they had never seen such eyes before. The twins' gaze was wide and hollow, not of children, but of something older, something broken. Dust clung to their hair, their clothes torn as if they had been there for weeks. The air smelled of damp stone, candle wax, and something sour, like milk that had turned. Who had brought them here? And why were they tied, as though they were never meant to part? The church had not been used in nearly a decade. Locals avoided it, claiming strange sounds echoed inside when the wind moved through its rafters. Some swore they saw a faint glow through its broken windows at night. Few dared to enter, until that morning when a group of children chasing a stray dog pushed open the heavy doors. The dog darted into the shadows, and what followed was a scream so sharp it echoed across the village. When adults rushed in, they found not only the twins but also remnants of something ritualistic. Wax dripped thickly on the stone floor, though no candle remained. Patterns were carved into the pews, scratches forming circles and crude shapes no villager could explain. The twins did not speak, not when they were carried out into the light, not when they were offered bread and water. Their lips moved, but only in whispers no one understood. At night, when placed in a caretaker's home, one of them began to hum, a slow, tuneless sound that seemed more like mourning than melody. The other would rock gently, pressing their head against their sibling's shoulder as though bound by more than rope. And in that silence, a question grew heavier with each passing hour. Were they victims or survivors of something the village dared not name? The discovery of the twins unsettled the town deeply. The church had always been a place people avoided, but now it felt cursed. Mothers kept their children close. Men refused to walk near its grounds after dark. And the local priest, pale and trembling, declared that some doors were never meant to be opened again. Still, the truth lingered like smoke. Who tied those children together? How had they survived alone in the shadows of that crumbling church? And why did they look upon their rescuers not with gratitude, but with a chilling kind of recognition, like they had been expecting them all along? When the twins were first carried from St. Bartholomew's, many believed the church was finally just an empty ruin. But whispers began almost at once, rumors that not everything had been removed. Weeks later, a group of men dared to go back inside. They carried lanterns and long sticks, half to ward off animals and half to defend themselves against whatever they feared might still linger. The moment they stepped in, the air seemed heavier, thick with the odor of damp wood and something metallic. And then they saw it. On the far end of the altar, surrounded by a crust of melted wax, a candle burned faintly. Its wick was short, but its flame steady, unwavering. No one could explain it. The church had been abandoned for 10 years. How could a candle still burn? One man swore he had seen the same flame weeks earlier, on the very morning the children were discovered. He swore it was the same size, the same glow, as though time refused to touch it. The discovery of the candle brought unease to the entire village. Some said it was proof of witchcraft. Others believed it was a sign from God, a warning or a curse. And then there were the old ones, the gray-haired villagers who remembered the church before its doors were sealed. They whispered of a sect that once gathered there, a small, secretive group who lit candles for rituals never spoken aloud. They claimed the flames were not meant for light, but for calling something, keeping it present, keeping it bound. If the candles still burned, did that mean the ritual had never ended? Soon after, Stories of strange happenings multiplied. A shepherd swore he saw figures moving through the broken windows at night. A young girl claimed she heard children's laughter echoing from the rafters, though the nave was empty. And always, there was talk of the twins. Some villagers wondered if the children had been left as offerings. Others believed they had been created by the church itself, born from its darkness. The twins, still silent, only deepened the dread. When asked about the candle, they did not answer. But one evening, as the flame of a household lamp flickered, one of them began to murmur. Not words, never words, but the same low hum they had made in the church. The sound rose and fell like a chant, matching the pulse of the wavering flame. The caretaker swore the candle's glow brightened in rhythm with the child's voice. From that night on, the villagers treated the children with a fearful reverence. No one dared to cut the rope that bound them. No one dared to question why they sometimes stared into empty corners as though someone invisible stood there. And no one dared return to St. Bartholomew's after dark. But the candle did not go out. Even decades later, when wanderers passed by the ruined church, they claimed they could still see it burning faintly in the nave. Always steady, always waiting. And so the question lingered. Was the candle keeping the children alive, or keeping something else from escaping? In the weeks that followed their discovery, the village expected someone, anyone, to arrive and claim the children. A parent, a relative, a desperate traveler who had lost them along the road. But no one came. The parish posted notices in nearby towns. Messengers were sent to the city, carrying descriptions of the twins, pale, identical, with eyes too old for their years. And yet, no word returned. It was as though the children had appeared out of nothing, tied together as if they had never belonged to the world outside the church. The caretaker who housed them grew restless. The rope that bound their wrists together was frayed, yet no one dared untie it. Each time a villager suggested cutting it loose, the twins reacted the same way. Their breathing quickened, their eyes widened, and then came the sound, a soft hiss like air escaping between teeth. The sound was not anger. It was warning. At night, the caretaker heard them move in perfect rhythm. If one shifted, the other followed, as though they were one body, split into two. They rarely spoke, but when they did, it was only to each other, strange mutters, words tangled in whispers too fast to catch. Once, the caretaker pressed her ear close and thought she heard something familiar. Names. Not of people she knew, but names repeated again and again, as if the children were keeping a list. And then, one morning, she woke to find symbols scratched into the wooden wall beside their bed. Circles intersected with crosses, marks drawn by small hands but too precise for children. The caretaker tried to scrub them away, but the twins only stared at her with cold, unblinking eyes. She left them there. The town grew divided. Some said the twins were orphans of a plague or famine, abandoned by parents too poor to keep them. Others whispered darker things, that they had been left on purpose, born into a family tied to the rituals once held at St. Bartholomew's. But the greatest unease came not from what people believed, but from what they began to feel. Those who spent time near the twins swore they left with a heaviness in their chest. Sleep was uneasy, dreams twisted. The children carried a silence with them that seemed to spread, like shadows cast too far. Still, no one came forward. No name, no claim, no blood to tie them to the world beyond. Months passed, and winter drew in. Snow pressed against the roofs. The nights grew long, and the village quieted. Yet the twins remained. One evening, the parish priest visited them. He had avoided them until then, but guilt weighed on him. Kneeling beside the children, he asked softly, "Who are you?" For the first time, one of the twins looked directly into his eyes. Their lips parted. The answer came not as a name, but as a question. "Who are you?" The priest fled the house before dawn. He never returned. By spring, it was clear to everyone that the twins had no past. No one searched for them. No one mourned them. They belonged to no family, no home, no history. They were children no one claimed. children who seemed to belong only to each other, and perhaps to something still burning inside the walls of that church. By the spring of 1835, the parish decided to search deeper. If the twins had no family stepping forward, perhaps the truth lay hidden in old papers, birth ledgers, baptismal records, burial lists. The church had kept meticulous records for centuries. Every birth, every death, every name carved into the story of the village. Surely, somewhere, there would be mention of these children. The priest's assistant, a young man named Thomas Gray, was tasked with the search. He carried a lantern down into the parish cellar, where the records were kept in damp wooden chests lined with iron clasps. The air there was thick with mold and dust. Rats scurried in the corners. He began carefully, leafing through yellowed pages, tracing his finger along fading ink. Dozens of births from the year 1834. Dozens of baptisms. But no twins. No names that matched. No trace of them at all. And then Thomas noticed something worse. Whole pages were missing. Entire sections of the parish book, decades of names, had been torn clean out. The edges were jagged, as though ripped in haste. Records that should have stretched back 50 years were instead riddled with gaps. Thomas turned page after page, heart pounding faster each time. Children's names gone. Families erased. Whole bloodlines missing from the book. When he carried the damaged records to the priest, the old man turned pale. His hands shook as he touched the torn spine of the book. "These pages were here," he whispered. "I copied them myself. They cannot just vanish." But vanish they had. The news spread quickly, and unease thickened. Some villagers remembered baptisms in that church. They remembered funerals, prayers, babies held over holy water. Yet when they looked for proof, the paper denied it. The children they swore had lived seemed never to have existed. It was not just the twins missing. It was dozens of names, dozens of children. Whispers began to swirl. Had the records been destroyed to hide something? Or had the church itself swallowed the memories of those children, erasing them from history? That summer, Thomas claimed he heard voices in the cellar at night. Not whispers, but cries, small, broken cries echoing through the stone. At first he thought it was rats. But one night, when he pressed his ear against the chest of records, he swore he heard two voices clearer than the rest. They sounded like children. They were repeating the same thing again and again, in a rhythm that matched the faint hum the twins made in their sleep. Names. Always names. The priest tried to calm the villagers, insisting the missing pages were the result of damp, of decay, of time. But he avoided the cellar now. He avoided the church, too. His sermons grew short, his eyes hollow. And when pressed about the missing records, he would only shake his head and mutter that some things were not meant to be remembered. Yet the people could not forget. The absence itself was too loud. If the children were never written down, did that mean they were never meant to live? The twins remained bound, silent, unclaimed. But their presence was beginning to change the village, making everyone question what was real and what had already been erased. By autumn of 1835, the village's fear had grown into something heavier, suspicion. The missing records, the bound twins, the candles still burning inside St. Bartholomew's. Too many unanswered questions lingered. And then the whispers began. Some said the church had once been more than a place of worship, that long before its doors were barred, it had hosted secret gatherings, meetings held at night, when the bells were silent and the moon cast shadows across the nave. It was not prayer, they whispered. It was ritual. Old men remembered seeing carriages arrive at odd hours. Strangers cloaked in heavy garments slipping into the church without a word. Villagers spoke of lights glowing from the broken windows, rhythmic chants carried by the wind. Most had dismissed these tales as superstition. But now, with the twins alive and unclaimed, the rumors began to feel less like fantasy and more like truth resurfacing. They began calling it by a name spoken in hushed tones, the Circle of Ash. The circle, according to the fragments of gossip, was not a single family, but a gathering of chosen men and women from surrounding parishes. Bound not by blood, but by oath. Their purpose? To preserve what others would destroy. Some claimed it was knowledge too dangerous for ordinary hands. Others said it was darker, an obsession with keeping souls tethered to the world of the living. The twins, many began to believe, were not abandoned at all. They were placed there, bound as part of something unfinished. A farmer's wife swore her grandfather had once spoken of children bound for the circle. He had told her, in a drunken ramble, that when certain stars aligned, the circle sought twins. Always twins, for they were mirrors of each other, two bodies with one thread of life. A thread that could be twisted, knotted, perhaps even severed and rejoined. When the woman told her story aloud at the tavern, silence fell. For everyone had seen the way the twins moved, one shifting when the other stirred, one flinching when the other winced, as though their souls were stitched together. Not long after, a letter surfaced. Thomas Gray, the priest's assistant who had searched the parish records, discovered it inside an old hymnal. The ink was faded, but the words clear enough. The twins are to be kept together. Never untie them. The flame must remain. The letter was unsigned. No date, no name. When Thomas read it aloud to the priest, the old man struck it from his hands, trembling as though he'd touched fire. He swore the letter was a forgery, some trick to deepen fear. But when the letter was examined again, the parchment was found to match the same paper used for parish records a decade earlier. The priest avoided the topic thereafter, but Thomas could not. He began to believe the circle had not vanished at all, that its shadow still lingered. By winter, the whispers turned into dread. Some villagers swore they saw cloaked figures watching the caretaker's house from the tree line. Others said the twins' hum at night was not their own voice, but something joined in, a harmony just beyond hearing. And always, there was the flame still burning in the abandoned church. The villagers stopped calling it candle. They called it the Watcher's Light. For who but a secret society would keep a flame alive across decades? And who but that same circle would leave behind twins, bound as proof that their work was not yet finished? Winter had nearly passed when an old woman, long forgotten by most of the village, stepped forward with a confession. Her name was Margaret Hale, a midwife who had once served families across 3 parishes. Her back was bent, her eyes clouded, but her voice, shaking though it was, carried a weight that silenced the room. "I know those children," she whispered. "I was there when they were born." The villagers leaned in, hungry for answers. Margaret explained that nearly 2 years before the twins were found, she had been summoned in secret. A carriage had arrived at her cottage at midnight, driven by a man who gave no name. He pressed coins into her hand and warned her, no questions, no words to anyone. She was blindfolded for the journey, led through winding roads until she could no longer tell which parish she was in. When the cloth was removed, she found herself inside a candlelit chamber. Not a home, not a cottage, but what looked like a crypt beneath stone arches. There a woman labored, pale, silent, her face veiled. She never spoke, not even when the pains grew fierce. Beside her stood cloaked figures, unmoving, watching. They did not comfort her. They did not pray. They simply stared. The children came into the world in silence. No cry, no wail. Twins, identical, bound already by the strange stillness that seemed to thicken the air. Margaret swore she felt a chill the moment they were born, as though something unseen had entered the room with them. When she reached for scissors to cut the cord, one of the cloaked figures stopped her hand. "They must remain," the figure whispered. Bound as one, the memory haunted her. For months, Margaret tried to bury it, but guilt gnawed at her bones. She had delivered many children, seen joy, tears, relief, but never silence, never rope binding tiny wrists together as they were taken from her arms. When news spread of the twins found in St. Bartholomew's, she knew. They were the same. There was no mistaking it. But she had stayed silent, out of fear. Fear of the cloaked figures. Fear of the secret society, whose name she dared not utter. Until now, the villagers pressed her for more. Who was the veiled woman? Where was this chamber, But Margaret shook her head. I do not know. I was blindfolded again when I left. I only know they were never meant to be ours. They were meant for them. Her words spread like wildfire. The circle of ash was no longer a whisper. It was a certainty. The twins were not orphans abandoned by chance. They were chosen, brought into the world for a purpose no villager could understand. Days later, Margaret was found dead in her cottage. Some said she passed peacefully in her sleep. Others swore her face was twisted, her mouth open as though she had tried to scream. No one attended her burial but a gravedigger and the priest. Yet the villagers whispered that her grave would not stay closed, that the earth itself shifted as if restless above her body. And so the story of the twins deepened. They were no longer nameless. They were children of ritual, brought forth in secrecy, tied not by fate but by human hands. The question that now haunted the village was not who they were, but what they had been born to become. By the spring of 1836, the village had grown restless. Fear hung over the streets like fog, heavy and suffocating. The twins remained bound, still humming their strange songs in the caretaker's cottage. Yet it wasn't the living who disturbed the villagers most now. It was the dead. One afternoon, a group of boys dared each other to run through St. Bartholomew's churchyard. The grass had grown high, curling over stones so weather-worn that names could barely be read. But when the boys came back, they carried with them something chilling. Dozens of graves, they swore, bore no names at all, just blank, smooth stones. No dates, no words, nothing to mark who lay beneath. The villagers dismissed it at first. Weather could erase carvings over decades. Rain could wear away names. But when men went to see for themselves, they found the boys had spoken true. Whole rows of stones were unmarked, as though they had never been carved at all. The discovery ignited an old fear. Some recalled that the parish records had vanished. Now it seemed the very graves had been swallowed too. Whose bodies lay beneath those nameless stones? Were they the missing children? Were they the erased families whose names had been ripped from the parish books? The silence of the stones offered no answer. But then something stranger came. A gravedigger named Samuel, who had worked the churchyard for decades, confessed one night at the tavern that he had buried infants there. Too many, he said, more than he had ever seen in any village. Small coffins lowered into the ground under moonlight, without prayer, without bells. He had been paid in silence to forget, but he could not forget. He swore he had buried twins once before. Not the ones still bound in the caretaker's house, but others, pale, still lifeless. Their wrists tied together just the same. The villagers demanded proof. But when Samuel led them to the plot where he swore the bodies lay, they found only one stone, blank as the rest. He dug, trembling, until sweat slicked his brow. The soil gave way easily, but the coffin he expected was gone. There was only earth, undisturbed, as though nothing had ever been buried at all. From that night on, villagers avoided the churchyard. Some swore they heard scratching beneath their feet as they passed. Others claimed to see small shapes moving between the stones at dusk, slipping into the shadows of the ruined church. And then came the strangest tale of all. A widow who lived near the edge of the churchyard swore she saw the twins there one night. Not the bound ones, others, pale as bone, moving hand in hand between the nameless stones. She screamed for her neighbors, but by the time they came running, the figures were gone. The priest tried to calm his flock, insisting these were tricks of grief, fear, imagination. But even he began locking his doors at night, crossing himself twice before sleep. The nameless graves remained, silent, unyielding, as if mocking the villagers' attempts to remember the past. It seemed the circle of ash had not only stolen names from paper, but from stone as well. By 1837, the fear had become unbearable. The villagers no longer gathered near the church. Children were kept inside after dusk. Travelers who passed through noticed the silence, the way doors shut quickly at night, as if the entire town was holding its breath. And slowly, people began to make a choice, to forget. The parish stopped speaking of the twins. The priest never mentioned them in sermons. The caretaker, though burdened with them still, was urged to keep them hidden from sight. If the twins could not be explained, then perhaps they could be erased. But forgetting is never so simple. One family, desperate to leave the shadow of the church, packed their belongings and fled to another parish. Months later, word returned. They had vanished on the road, their cart found overturned by the riverbank, belongings strewn, but no trace of bodies. Whispers spread. Perhaps they had been taken. Perhaps no one could truly leave. Others swore the twins themselves haunted them. A farmer's wife awoke to find tiny footprints in the ash by her hearth. A shepherd claimed he saw the children standing in his field at dawn, staring, unmoving, until he blinked and they were gone. The caretaker insisted the twins never left her cottage, but no one believed her. That year, the village held no harvest festival. No bells rang for weddings. Even funerals grew quiet, with families burying their dead in silence. It was as if life itself had dulled, drained by the weight of the secret they refused to speak. And yet, the twins endured, still bound, still whispering to each other in voices no one could understand. Some nights, the caretaker swore she heard other voices answering back, not from the children, but from the walls. The hum became a chorus, soft and endless, weaving through the air until her hair stood on end. She prayed for deliverance, but none came. By spring, the decision was made. The village council declared the matter closed. No more talk of the circle of ash. No more discussion of nameless graves or burning candles. The church would remain abandoned, sealed, left to rot. The twins would live quietly, as though they had never been found. Forgetting became law, but silence does not erase memory. It only drives it deeper into the cracks where fear grows strongest. Years later, when travelers asked about the ruined church on the hill, villagers would shrug. Old stone, nothing more, they would say. They did not mention the candle that still glowed faintly in the dark. They did not mention the twins who still moved as one, their rope never cut. The village tried to bury its past, just as it had buried its nameless dead. But forgetting did not stop the whispers, and it did not stop the truth from clawing its way back to the surface. For even in silence, the circle of ash had not let go. In 1842, nearly 8 years after the twins were discovered, a letter arrived at the parish. Its parchment was creased, its ink smudged by a trembling hand. It came from an asylum 2 counties away, a place known for housing the broken, the raving, and the forgotten. The letter was written by a man named Elias Finch. He claimed to be the elder brother of the twins. "I have seen them," the letter began, the handwriting jagged, frantic. "They are mine, yet they are not. You must not let them stay." Elias told a story the priest read aloud only once before hiding the paper away. He wrote of a family once tied to the circle of ash. His mother, he claimed, had been one of the veiled women in the rituals. His father, a man who gave his children freely to the cause. Elias was the firstborn. He remembered being taken as a child into the church at night, watching strange rites performed in candlelight. He remembered hearing names spoken in circles, voices rising as the flames flickered. He remembered being told that one day his blood would be required. But he escaped, or so he thought. When the twins were born, Elias swore he saw them only once, in the chamber beneath the church, bound together, placed before the altar. He claimed the circle had chosen them for something he barely understood, an attempt to fuse what should never be fused. "They are not two," Elias wrote. "They are one. One soul stretched too far, breaking the seam of the world." He begged the parish to destroy them. "Do not untie them. Do not free them. Burn the rope, burn the flesh, before the circle returns to claim what belongs to them." The letter ended in a scrawl of half-written words, as though Elias's hand had been torn away mid-sentence. The priest who read it aloud locked it away in the parish chest. He told no one of its contents, save for Thomas Gray, the assistant. But rumors spread regardless. The villagers could not be silenced forever. They began to wonder if the twins were not abandoned at all, but left behind as bait, a way for the circle to return. Months after the letter's arrival, news came that Elias Finch was dead. His body was found in the asylum's courtyard, twisted at odd angles as though dropped from a great height. The asylum reported suicide, but whispers carried another version, that cloaked figures had been seen at the asylum gates the night before. When the caretaker learned of the letter, she wept. She had raised the twins in silence for years, watching them grow pale and tall, still bound as though the rope had become a second skin. She begged the priest to tell her the truth. What were they? But the priest would not answer. His face had grown gaunt, his voice thin. He died within the year, and with him, the letter was buried beneath dust. Yet the memory of Elias's warning lingered. They are not two. They are one. And one day, the circle will come to finish what they began. By the 1840s, the village had nearly succeeded in burying the memory of the twins. They still lived in the caretaker's cottage, taller now, their wrists bound by fresh rope each year. But people no longer spoke of them openly. They were shadows, best left unmentioned. It might have remained that way, if not for the doors. One stormy night, the wind howled across the valley, rattling shutters and tearing branches from the trees. When dawn came, a shepherd passing the hill noticed something strange. The great wooden doors of St. Bartholomew's, long swollen shut by rain and nailed fast by iron spikes, stood wide open. Inside, the church was darker than before. The air stank of mildew and wax. Yet on the altar, untouched by wind or weather, the candle still burned, its flame steady, unwavering. The villagers blamed the storm. Perhaps the wind had forced the doors open. But when carpenters hammered them closed again, sealing them tighter with chains, the same thing happened weeks later. A still night. No storm. Yet by morning, the doors gaped wide once more. It became a pattern. No matter how many times the church was sealed, the doors would not remain shut. Some nights, villagers swore they heard them creak open, slowly, like a breath drawn in the dark. Others claimed to see figures slipping inside, their shapes swallowed by the candle's glow. By now, the twins had grown into young adults. Their eyes had deepened into something almost inhuman, reflecting light strangely, as though a shadow always lingered within. When told of the doors, they only stared. Then, one evening, one of them whispered 3 words for the first time anyone could understand. "It is ready." Panic gripped the village. The council begged the caretaker to drive the twins away, send them to another parish, lock them in the asylum where their supposed brother had died. But the caretaker refused. She had grown frail, but her bond to them was unbreakable. If they go, she warned, they will not go alone. That winter, animals began disappearing from the fields. Sheep, dogs, even horses. No blood. No straged. Just gone. Each time, the church doors were found open the next morning. And then, one night, a boy vanished. He was last seen walking home from the tavern, lantern in hand. The next morning, his lantern was found in the churchyard, its glass cracked, its flame long dead. The doors of St. Bartholomew's stood open, and inside the candle on the altar burned brighter than ever. The village could not forget anymore. The silence they had forced upon themselves shattered. Fear roared back like fire. Some swore the circle had returned. Others believed the twins had finally awakened to what they truly were. The caretaker died before she could say more, found slumped in her chair, her hands still clutching the rope that bound the children together. The twins themselves vanished not long after. One morning, the cottage was empty. The rope lay on the floor, cut clean through. When the villagers stormed the church, they found the doors wide open. The candle still burned, but the altar was no longer empty. 2 sets of footprints led away from it, pressed deep into the dust, side by side, vanishing into the shadows where the light could not follow. From that day on, no one in the village spoke of the twins again. But travelers passing the ruins swore the doors were always open, no matter the season, no matter the storm. And on certain nights, if you dared step inside, you might hear it still, the sound of 2 voices humming in perfect unison, circling the flame that never dies.